split cleanly into two parts, the one where I loved Lucas with everything I had, and the one where I realized love isn't always enough. For 5 years, Lucas and I were inseparable. We met in college, and our relationship survived internships, late night study sessions, and the shaky first steps into adulthood. By the time we settled into a two-bedroom apartment together, I thought we'd already built a quiet foundation for forever. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't chasing clout or ambition measured in dollar signs. I was steady loyal. I had a dependable career as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm, a small silver hatchback that got me from point A to point B, and a routine that felt comforting rather than suffocating. Lucas used to say he loved that about me, that I kept him grounded when the world spun too fast. But then came his friends. They weren't cruel in obvious ways. No, what made them dangerous was the subtlety. At first, it was the little digs. At a dinner party, one of his buddies leaned back in his chair and said, "Heather, you're so stable," his lips curving around the word stable, like it was a synonym for boring. The others laughed soft and knowing. Lucas just rubbed the back of his neck and changed the subject. Another time, his closest friend Bianca cocked her head at me across a glass of champagne. "So, Heather, when are you going to stop playing it safe and start something bold? A woman like you could do so much more. Don't you think Lucas deserves someone with bigger vision?" The jab was wrapped in a smile, but the implication was sharp. I wasn't enough. I thought Lucas was above it. I thought he saw through the shallowness of their hustle culture, their obsession with designer brands, and curated Instagram lives. I thought he understood the value of having someone who remembered his mom's birthday, who stayed up until 2 a.m., quizzing him for exams, who brewed his coffee the way he liked on Sunday mornings. I was wrong. Over the next few months, I noticed subtle changes. Lucas's eyes flickered with irritation when I talked about setting money aside for our future trips. He rolled his eyes when I suggested another movie night instead of some rooftop launch party one of his friends invited us to. His phone buzzed constantly, always lighting up with group chats I wasn't part of. The distance crept in cold and steady, and then came the night everything collapsed. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary weekday turned unforgettable. I came home late after a long meeting, exhausted, craving nothing more than to kick off my heels and curl into his arms. But when I opened the door, the living room felt wrong. Lucas was sitting on the couch, fidgeting with a throw pillow. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Hey," I said softly, setting my purse down. "What's wrong?" For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and unnatural. Then he spoke. "Heather," he began, his tone flat, rehearsed. "This isn't working." My heart stuttered. What isn't working? Us, is this about the Paris trip? We can look at flights. He cut me off. "It's not about a trip. It's about everything. About you." I froze. Meh. "My friends think you're a loser, Heather." His words landed with a brutal finality. "They think you have no ambition, and I'm tired of defending you." The blood drained from my face. He wasn't even speaking for himself. His voice was a cruel echo of theirs. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. Is that what you think? That I'm a loser?" He finally met my eyes. They were cold, certain. "I think you're comfortable. Too comfortable. I want someone who takes risks, someone who pushes me, who understands my world." My lips parted, but nothing came out. My chest was burning, my palms numb. And then came the final blow. "I've met someone who does. Her name's Bianca. She gets it. We just connect." Bianca, his closest friend. My stomach twisted, nausea mixing with heartbreak. In that moment, the Lucas I thought I knew was gone. Sitting across from me was a stranger with my lover's face, a man who had chosen shallow approval over the woman who had held him up for years. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, a strange calm washed over me, cold and absolute. I stood there for a long moment, silence pressing in from every corner of the apartment we'd once called home. Then, without a word, I turned toward our bedroom. My hands moved on their own, pulling clothes from hangers, folding them into my duffel bag. Behind me, his voice wavered. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said, my tone flat, stripped of emotion. "You can't just leave. We need to talk about this, about the apartment, the bills." "You already figured it out," I replied, zipping the bag with finality. "You wanted someone who takes risks. Here's one. I'm out. You can have the apartment. You can figure out the rest with Bianca. I'm sure she'll handle it." I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked past him. "Heather, wait," his voice cracked, panicked. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I opened the door, stepped into the cool night air, and let it slam shut behind me. The Heather who had loved Lucas died on that couch. What remained was something else, someone else. And though my heart was breaking, a quiet whisper stirred inside me, fragile but fierce. The loser you thought I was is gone. The woman who's about to rise, you'll never recognize her again. When the door closed behind me that night, it wasn't just a sound. It was a death knell, the end of the life I had poured myself into. I drove aimlessly for hours, with the duffel bag on the seat beside me, the city blurring into streaks of neon and headlights. My phone buzzed again and again, calls, messages, all from Lucas. I didn't answer. Every vibration felt like an insect crawling across my skin. Finally, I tossed the phone face down onto the passenger seat and let the silence devour me. By midnight, I ended up at my parents' house. My mom opened the door in her robe, her face etched with worry as soon as she saw me. She didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry like a child. My father stood behind her, quiet, his expression saying everything words couldn't. For the next few days, I barely left the guest room. My mom would leave trays of food at the door. Soup, tea, little sandwiches cut the way I liked when I was 10. Sometimes I ate, sometimes I didn't. My father would knock once in a while, then slide a note under the door. "We're here when you're ready." That was all. I didn't tell them the full story. I couldn't bear to say it aloud. My boyfriend cheated on me with his glamorous best friend, and when he ended things, he called me a loser. It sounded like a cruel line from a bad movie. I simply said we'd broken up. They nodded and respected my silence. But silence can be as heavy as grief. Everywhere I turned, ghosts of the life I'd lost haunted me. Lucas's toothbrush still in my overnight bag, his old hoodie that smelled faintly of cedar cologne, the playlist we made together looping endlessly in my head until I couldn't stand music at all. For a week I drowned in it, and then one morning I woke to the soft chime of an email notification. Bleary-eyed, I almost ignored it, but something tugged at me. It was from a tech company in another city, a job offer I had once declined months earlier. They'd been impressed with my profile and wanted me to reconsider. Back then, I had turned it down because Lucas didn't want to move. Too far, he'd said. Too risky. And I'd listened. Always listened. But now, there was nothing left to hold me back. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as my chest pounded. It felt reckless, terrifying. But for the first time in years, I wasn't deciding based on someone else's comfort. I hit reply. Yes, I accept. Just like that, my future shifted. The move was chaotic. I sold my car for quick cash, stuffed my belongings into boxes, and rented a small one-bedroom in a city where I knew no one. The apartment wasn't much bare white walls, a kitchen sink that dripped, but it had a balcony overlooking the skyline. At night I stood there barefoot, the wind tangling my hair, and felt like the city was daring me to rebuild. At first, the loneliness was suffocating. The quiet roared in my ears, and the bed felt impossibly wide, but then I picked up a paintbrush again. Painting had been my passion before Lucas. I'd once dreamed of showing my work in galleries, but somewhere along the way I traded canvases for spreadsheets, brushes for balance sheets. Lucas's friends used to laugh when I painted. Cute hobby, they'd smirk. And slowly I let it slip away. Now alone, I returned to it. The first stroke of acrylic on canvas was shaky, uncertain. The second was steadier. Soon my living room floor was littered with paint tubes, rags, and canvases stacked against the wall. Colors bled into each other under my hands, and I poured every ounce of grief, anger, and hope into them. Nights stretched into dawns. Some canvases came out raw and violent, thick, dark smears across white. Others glowed with bursts of gold and crimson, like fire cracking through shadows. Every piece was a confession I hadn't spoken aloud. Painting became my therapy. Each brushstroke felt like stitching pieces of myself back together. And slowly the silence stopped feeling like punishment. It became space, breathing room. At work, I pushed myself harder than ever. The job was demanding late nights, tough clients, but it was exhilarating. For once, my ambition wasn't about proving myself to Lucas or his friends. It was mine. Somewhere between the spreadsheets and the paint-stained nights, I realized something. The Heather who had begged for someone's approval no longer existed. The woman replacing her was sharper, bolder. Still a whisper lingered in the back of my mind. A warning. Ghosts never stay buried forever. And as I stood on my balcony one night staring at the city lights, I knew sooner or later Lucas would find his way back into my life. But this time I wouldn't be the one on my knees. The first few months in the city felt like walking on a tightrope. Every day I balanced between exhaustion and exhilaration, fear and possibility. At work, I was suddenly surrounded by people who lived and breathed ambition. Not the shallow, performative ambition Lucas's friends flaunted, but something sharper, more purposeful. My new team pushed me, questioned me, sometimes even intimidated me. And for once, I didn't shrink. I rose to meet them. Late nights became routine. I'd leave the office with my blazer slung over one shoulder, the city still buzzing at midnight. I learned to present with confidence, to defend my ideas with a voice that didn't tremble. Each small victory felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. At home, my apartment slowly transformed. The sterile white walls became alive with color. Canvases leaned in every corner, brush strokes bold and unapologetic. Where there had once been silence, now there was music, soft jazz, indie folk, sometimes just the rhythmic scratch of my brushes against canvas. Painting no longer felt like a guilty indulgence. It was survival. It was me. One Saturday morning, I opened my curtains to let the light spill across half-finished canvases scattered across the floor. As I traced the outline of a phoenix rising in reds and golds, a thought struck me. This isn't just healing. This is becoming. The Heather who used to prioritize everyone else's dreams was gone. In her place stood a woman who made space for her own. Of course, ghosts still lingered. I blocked Lucas on everything. But sometimes when I walked past a couple holding hands on the street, my chest would ache with memory. When I saw a photo of Paris on a travel blog, I felt that old sting. Why couldn't we have been enough? But the difference now was that the ache didn't consume me. It reminded me of who I used to be and why I could never go back. I cut ties with every mutual friend, deleted old photos, threw away his shirts that I'd once slept in when I missed him. I wasn't doing it out of anger. I was protecting my peace. A year slipped by, not in a blur, but in a steady, deliberate rhythm. Seasons shifted the first winter in my new city. I learned how the streets sparkled with Christmas lights, how the snow muffled the noise into a kind of peaceful hush. By spring, I was painting outside on my balcony, the air warm on my skin, the skyline glowing with sunset. At work, my name started to matter. I wasn't the quiet new analyst anymore. I was the one people turned to for answers. My manager pulled me aside after a particularly brutal meeting and said, Heather, you don't just hold your own, you command the room. It was the kind of validation I used to crave from Lucas, but now it came from within too. My personal life, though, was quieter. I didn't rush into dating. I wasn't ready to hand my heart to someone else, not yet. Instead, I took myself out to dinner, explored museums alone, learned how to enjoy solitude without it feeling like punishment. And then one evening at a local gallery event, something unexpected happened. I'd submitted a piece hesitant, almost embarrassed, after a colleague encouraged me. It was one of my Phoenix paintings, vibrant and chaotic, a reflection of my rebirth. I didn't think anyone would notice. But when I walked into the gallery, people were gathered in front of it, discussing it, pointing at it. A curator scribbled notes on a clipboard. For the first time, I realized my art wasn't just for me anymore. It was speaking to others. The thought terrified me, but it also lit a spark deep in my chest. That night, lying awake in bed, I let myself remember the past not with pain, but with clarity. If Lucas hadn't broken me down, I wouldn't have rebuilt myself into this. If his words hadn't cut me, I never would have painted fire into a canvas. If he hadn't chosen Bianca, I never would have chosen me. For the first time in a long time, I felt not just whole, but proud. And yet, as I drifted into sleep, one truth tugged at me like a shadow at the edge of my vision. Ghosts don't stay buried forever. And Lucas was a ghost I knew I hadn't seen the last of. It happened on an ordinary Thursday night. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, paint smudges across my hands, a half-finished canvas propped against the wall. The city outside pulsed with neon, but inside, the only sound was the hum of my desk lamp. I was lost in the rhythm of color when my phone buzzed with a notification. For a moment, I froze. Hardly anyone outside of work messaged me anymore. My circle was small by design. Colleagues, a few art friends, my parents. The name on the screen startled me. Mark. He'd been one of Lucas's oldest friends. Out of all of them, Mark was the least toxic, the one who sometimes threw me a sympathetic look when the others' jabs got too sharp. Still, we hadn't spoken since I disappeared. Curiosity prickled. Against my better judgment, I opened the message. Hey, Heather. Sorry for the random text. Hope you're doing okay. I just thought you should know. About Lucas. My heart thudded a traitor against my calm exterior. I hesitated then, typed back a single word. What? A moment later, 3 dots pulsed on the screen. Then the truth spilled out. Bianca drained him, Mark wrote. The big business she convinced him to pour money into total scam. Some luxury startup that never even launched. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits everywhere. She bailed, took what was left of his savings, and disappeared. I stared at the screen, reading the words twice, 3 times. Mark continued. He's broke, Heather. Completely broke. His friends, you know how they are. They've all abandoned him. He's on his own now. Honestly, he's a mess. I sat there, phone glowing in my hand, paintbrush still dripping onto the floor. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing. No surge of triumph, no pang of longing, no satisfaction, just emptiness, like hearing about a stranger's misfortune. The Lucas I had loved didn't exist anymore. The one who betrayed me had already died in my heart the night I walked out. Whoever Mark was talking about was just a hollow echo. Oddly enough, the timing was poetic. 2 days earlier, I'd received an email from the gallery director who'd noticed my Phoenix painting. She wanted to feature more of my work in a small showcase for emerging artists. While Lucas's life was burning down, mine was just beginning to catch fire in the best way. I glanced around my apartment, the walls lined with canvases that had once felt like secret confessions. Now, they were invitations, proof that pain could transform into something people wanted to see, to feel. The parallel struck me so sharply it almost made me laugh. Lucas had spent years chasing an image surrounding himself with people who praised ambition, but never substance. And in the end, that hollow ambition consumed him. Me, I had nothing flashy. Just paint on my clothes, calluses on my fingers, and a quiet kind of pride that no one could take away. Still, that night's sleep didn't come easily. Lying in the dark, I thought about how fragile everything had been, how close I'd come to staying, to shrinking myself smaller and smaller until I disappeared inside his shadow. And then I thought about Bianca, the woman who had replaced me. I pictured her smile, the smug tilt of her chin, the night she asked me when I'd start being bold. The irony of her vanishing with Lucas's money was almost too sharp to bear. I should have felt vindicated, but instead all I felt was clarity. This wasn't my victory. This was his consequence. And yet a whisper of unease slid under my skin. Because if Lucas's world was collapsing, I knew where he might turn. To the woman he once dismissed as too safe. To the one he thought would always be there when everything else failed. Me. And I had no intention of being his safety net ever again. The first message came on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping coffee at my desk, skimming through quarterly reports when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. The text was simple. Hey, been thinking of you. Hope you're well. I didn't need to ask who it was. My chest tightened, but my hand was steady as I deleted the message without responding. By lunchtime, another came. I know I messed up, Heather. I've been through a lot lately. I miss our easy life. Easy life. That was what he called the 5 years I'd poured into us. The stability, the loyalty, the nights I stayed awake, listening to him dream, the mornings I brewed his coffee exactly the way he liked. To him it was easy. I blocked the number. 2 weeks later, a new number lit up my phone. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call. I almost let it ring out, but some instinct made me swipe to answer. For a moment, silence filled the line. Then his voice broke through, hoarse, cracked. Heather, it's me. Please don't hang up. The sound of him shattered the fragile calm I'd built. Memories I thought I'd buried roared back his laugh, his touch, his betrayal. I don't know who else to call, he stammered. His words tumbled out, choked with self-pity. Bianca, she left me. She was so cold, Heather. She just took everything and disappeared. I have nothing. I miss how you used to be there for me. You were always so stable. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate you. His sobs filled the line, messy and raw. For a moment, I felt the ghost of the woman I used to be, the one who would have dropped everything, rushed to his side, forgiven him. But that Heather was dead. When I spoke, my voice was calm, detached. Lucas, you sound like you're in a bad place, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm not your safety net anymore. Heather, please. No. My tone sharpened steel, sliding into my words. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hung up, blocked the number. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. That night I stood on my balcony. The city stretched out in glittering silence. The cool air kissed my skin, and I let the wind carry away the last echo of his voice. For the first time since Lucas had walked out of my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel unworthy. I felt powerful. Still a shadow lingered, because I knew Lucas. Men like him didn't give up easily. Not when the world they built had crumbled to dust. Not when the person they once dismissed as a loser was suddenly standing taller than ever. I knew this wasn't over. And deep down, I knew the next time I saw him, it wouldn't be through a screen. It would be face to face. The invitation arrived in a cream colored envelope, the kind people tuck into scrapbooks. Inside was an elegant card, scripted in gold. You are warmly invited to celebrate the wedding of Emily and Daniel. Emily, one of the few mutual friends I hadn't completely cut ties with. She'd never joined in the cruel jabs, never mocked me for being safe. She'd simply been caught in the crossfire. For days, I debated whether to go. Weddings were minefields, too many memories of promises, too many ghosts lingering in the corners of champagne glasses. But in the end, I said yes. Not for Emily, not even for the nostalgia. I went because I was no longer the woman who hid. And I wasn't going alone. Adrian slipped his arm through mine as we walked into the candlelit hall. He wasn't like Lucas. Where Lucas was polished, Adrian was raw, his shirt sleeves always rolled up his guitar case, never far from reach. He was a musician with ink stains on his fingers, a laugh that lit up the darkest corners, and an honesty that didn't need to be performed. We found our table near the dance floor, and as the band struck up, Adrian leaned close. You've got that look. What look, I asked, though my lips curved. The one where you're bracing for ghosts. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. Don't worry, I'll exorcise them if they show up. I laughed, the tension loosening from my chest. But then, halfway through the reception, the ghost walked in. Lucas. I saw him before he saw me. Thinner, restless, his once sharp suit hanging awkwardly on his frame. His eyes darted around the room, searching, desperate. And when they landed on me, it was as though the ground tilted. His expression cracked wide open shock first, then something rawer. I felt Adrian's hand tighten around mine. I followed his gaze, then turned back to my glass of champagne, the bubbles fizzing like nerves in my chest. Heather, Adrian's voice was gentle. That's him, isn't it? I nodded. That's him. Across the room, Lucas stared. Then, like a man drowning who had spotted a lifeline, he started walking toward us. When he reached the table, he hesitated. His eyes flickered from me to Adrian, then back to me. He looked smaller somehow, like all the arrogance had been carved out of him and replaced with regret. Heather, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. Can we talk, just for a moment, alone? Adrian's gaze flicked to me, searching my face for direction. I set my champagne glass down, my pulse hammering. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink, the laughter, the music all muted. It was just me, the man who had called me a loser, and the choice hanging between us. I exhaled slowly, my voice calm but firm. Fine, just a moment. Lucas's eyes brightened with a flicker of hope. He gestured toward the terrace, and I followed him through the sliding doors, the cool night air hitting my skin like a warning. Behind us, I caught Adrian's steady nod, a silent promise that I didn't have to face this ghost alone. Not really. Out on the terrace, fairy lights glowed above us, soft and golden. Lucas shoved his hands into his pockets, looking more like a boy than the man I once loved. Heather, his voice cracked. I need to explain. I need you to hear me. For the first time in years, I looked at him without flinching. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't the Lucas I once loved. This was a man undone by his own choices, standing in front of the woman he thought would always be waiting. But I wasn't waiting anymore. The terrace was quiet except for the muffled thrum of music seeping through the glass doors. Fairy lights cast a soft glow over Lucas's face, highlighting every line of exhaustion carved into it. He took a shaky breath. Heather, I was stupid. God, I was so stupid. Bianca, she wasn't what I thought she was. She used me. Took everything. And when it all fell apart, I realized, you were the only real thing I ever had. His words tumbled out like a dam breaking. I thought I wanted ambition, excitement, risk. But all of that was hollow. You gave me stability, love, a home. I threw that away. I threw you away. Please, I need you. I need us again. I stared at him, my hands resting calmly on the balcony rail. Once those words would have undone me. I would have rushed into his arms, convinced myself that love could fix the cracks. But now I felt nothing but a quiet detachment. You called me a loser, Lucas. My voice was steady, sharp. Do you remember that? You said I wasn't ambitious enough, that I wasn't enough. You said it like it was rehearsed, like you'd been practicing those words until they cut clean. His mouth opened, but I raised a hand to silence him. You wanted someone who pushed boundaries, who played with fire. Well, you found her, and you got burned. That's not my tragedy. That's yours. He flinched, his shoulders sagging. Heather, please, he whispered, his voice breaking. I don't want her. I don't want that life anymore. I want you. I see it now. You were everything I needed. You're the only person who ever believed in me. I let his desperation hang in the air before answering. You're wrong, I said softly. I did believe in you once. Too much. But that Heather, the one who lived for your approval, she doesn't exist anymore. The night you called me a loser, she died. And in her place, someone stronger was born. His eyes glistened. Stronger. But you still love me. I know you do. I almost pitied him. Almost. No, Lucas, what I feel isn't love, it's clarity. I don't need to hate you, and I don't need to forgive you. I just don't need you at all. I straightened, pulling my shoulders back. You said you wanted risk, so here's one: live your life without me. That's the only gamble left. For a moment, silence pressed down on us. Lucas stood there hollowed out as though my words had carved the last bit of hope from him. Inside, I heard laughter, Adrian's laugh. Warm, free, the kind that didn't need proving. I turned toward the door. Lucas reached out instinctively, his hand trembling as it hovered near my arm. But he didn't touch me. He couldn't, because he no longer had that right. I looked back just once, not with anger, not with longing, just with finality. You lost me, Lucas, and in losing me, I finally found myself. And with that, I walked inside. Adrian was waiting by the table, his eyes soft but steady. As I slipped my hand into his, a calm washed over me. Lucas was still out there fading under fairy lights, a shadow from a past that no longer owned me. The loser he thought I was, she was gone, and I was never going back. The wedding blurred into music and laughter, but for me, the night ended on the terrace. I had faced Lucas, really faced him, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth or fight for love that should have been unconditional. I just felt free. A few months later, the gallery showcase opened. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by white walls and the bold colors of my own work. Strangers strolled by, pausing to tilt their heads, to whisper about the way my brushstrokes seemed alive. One painting drew the most attention: a phoenix. Its wings stretched wide flames, licking at the edges, as if it had just risen from ash. Beneath it, in simple lettering, the title read, "The Loser." People asked me what it meant. I only smiled. Because I knew the truth, Lucas's words meant to wound me had become my rebirth. Adrian appeared at my side, his hand brushing mine. He looked at the phoenix, then at me. "It's not a loser," he said softly. "It's a victory." I smiled, warmth flooding my chest. Exactly. In that moment, I realized my revenge hadn't been cruel words or public humiliation. It hadn't been about proving him wrong in some dramatic confrontation. My revenge was my peace, my joy, the life I had built without him. Lucas hadn't been at the gallery, of course, but I heard through whispers he was still drifting, still searching for a place to land, still haunted by the choices he couldn't take back. And maybe one day he'd see my name in a magazine or walk past one of my pieces in a gallery window. Maybe he'd remember the woman he'd once dismissed. Maybe regret would claw at him again. But by then it wouldn't matter. Because I wasn't looking back anymore. That night, as the showcase wound down, I stepped outside into the cool air, Adrian's arm warm around my waist. Across the street, the city lights glittered like 1,000 little rebirths, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Lucas was a ghost, fading into the background of a story that no longer belonged to him. And me. I was alive, I was free, and the loser he once named me,